Finally, I have access to the time fibers. Now I just need to work out how to get out of here. Oh, hey everyone, and welcome to Groove Builders, the show where we create together. I'm your host, Disorderlycone, and in this episode, we're going to be combining two of my favorite things, time and dragons, with the Sun Chaser from Metal Time. This is a really awesome looking model. Not only do we have a really cool sundial and an awesome dragon to build, but we also get a clock. Yeah, apparently this is a clock sundial dragon, or dragon sundial clock, whichever one you prefer. But like any model, we have a couple of questions that we need to answer, like, what tools do you need to build a dragon sundial clock? How does this whole thing actually go together, and does it really work? These are all great questions, and we're going to get the answers. Let's get down to the workbench and open up our package. And boom, just like that, we begin building the Metal Time Sun Chaser. But before we get too far along, we need to talk about a few things, starting off with our instructions right here. These instructions are simplistic to understand, and the parts where they come from all are indicated by that little diagram at the top. They'll be highlighted in green. The important thing to remember here is that because it's broken down into these pages, you can take a break at any time. A great idea, where normally you kind of have to take out all of your pieces to kind of see where everything can go. I still do that in my video here, but that's for recording purposes. You don't necessarily need to do it. And in fact, when it comes to Metal Time builds, I personally recommend sticking to the page-by-page process. That's because sometimes two parts can look exactly the same, but they actually need to go in two different areas, and if you take them all out at once, you might get confused by this. Now, of course, the details are always in the pictures above, and so you can kind of figure out where parts can go, but to avoid that confusion, just stick to page-by-page building. One more thing that I get commonly asked about is how to secure our tabs. Well, if you look at the instructions right there, you can clearly see how they tell you to secure them, either by a bend or a twist. Yes, no circles or triangles, but still very clearly indicated above. Now that we understand our instructions, we need to talk tools, and the tools that I recommend for this build are our nippers. These are great for taking out all of our parts from our sheets without misshaping or warping any of our parts. What you need to do is just take your nippers and bring it as close to the part as possible, and then cut. This will leave a tiny little burr left over, and we'll actually need to clean that up with our next tool, our rasp. This rasp right here comes inside of your kit, and it's great for cleaning up any of our pieces that might have a little bit of a leftover piece of metal on them. All you need to do is just grab your part right at the tip about where you need to clean up a little bit, and then just use a circular motion like this to get that nub to go away. The important thing to remember here is you don't want to use too much force, because you can accidentally warp the piece or take away too much metal, and the parts might not fit together. So just be careful when using your rasp. The next tool I recommend is a good pair of pliers. These are great for shaping all of our pieces. And over the last year, I've become a really big fan of this particular set that comes in the kit. They're perfect for shaping all of our metal pieces, and not just Metal Time models, but other models as well. I highly recommend these, and if you pick them up with this kit, you're gonna love them too. The next one I recommend, just for shaping some of our more interesting shaped pieces, is our dapping set. These are great for any kind of our circular pieces that we need to achieve, like our dragon right here. If you need to get a little nice curve, you just kind of run it along your mouse pad and you'll get a really nice shaping. These are fantastic, and I highly recommend picking them up, not just for this build, but for other ones as well. Now, these tools are just our suggestions, and you really don't need anything but the tools that come in the kit to be able to build the Sun Chaser. But having these other tools really makes everything a lot easier for you. All right, now we've looked at our instructions and we know our tools. Let's get back to the build. Page 5. This is where we begin to build our dragon's face, and trying to get those 3D details is a little bit tricky, so let's talk about how I managed to do mine here. For the most part, I just used my thumbs and referenced the picture in the instructions right there to be able to get the right idea about what I needed. Then I actually matched up the part to the sides and try to see if everything lined up correctly. Mine did right away, but trying to get those teeth just right is a little bit harder. And for this, what I did was kind of put everything together first and then use my pliers to correct it before attaching the other side. This way, I knew exactly how this was going to look when I was finished, and I didn't need to put my pliers in there to adjust the teeth in any way. I highly recommend kind of following in this footstep, because trying to actually correct the teeth afterwards leads to a funky little mouth situation like I've seen in some other builds that have been posted online. So I highly recommend doing the teeth this way before moving on. You'll save yourself a lot of headache. Oh boy, page 16. Now this looks easy. You just need to kind of press everything in place and everything should be good. But the tolerances here are super sharp. Metal Time's done a really good job with the tolerances on their models, especially the newer ones. When it comes to this right here, you really need to be careful when pushing the two parts together and make sure they're kind of lined up beforehand, because if you don't, you're gonna have a lot of scratched metal in this area. As you can see, I definitely struggled with mine trying to get it into the right place. Yeah, you keep struggling. Don't worry. We're all listening to you struggle. Yeah, it was a heartache. But at the same time, if you line everything up really closely together and then give a good little tap push, everything should work out. But you just need to be patient and make sure things are lined up beforehand before getting frustrated like I did. And just when you thought it was going to get easier, you're hit with this arrow. The arrow does not have any connections, so don't bother looking for them or trying to make them like I did. It's not going to happen, it's not going to work. All of these pieces are just kind of placed together and then fed through the dragon. And trying to do that, yeah, it's a little harder than you might think, but if you're patient again and you do manage to get it through, it will stay together once it's placed into the dragon. Again, there are no tabs here, so don't try to do what I did. It's not going to work out, and if anything, it's going to make it a little bit harder to get this through the dragon area, and I think that that's why they didn't put any tabs on it. So again, be patient, take your time, you'll get through it eventually. Finally, page 26. This part of the build looks simple enough. You're just kind of placing everything together and moving these tabs ever so slightly. However, this is the most important part of this entire build, and that's because, like all builds that move, any kind of the motion parts need to have a free moving aspect to them. And if you tighten these tabs too much, you will actually have a non-working clock. The motor in the clock is strong, but it can't overcome a really tight connection. So make sure the Dragon can freely move around before putting the clock into place and getting everything secured. This is a very important moment, like I said, and it's very important that we take the extra time here to make sure that everything moves freely. You won't be having a working clock if this is not done right. So take your time, be patient, and just, play with it a little bit. And boom, there we have it, the Metal Time Sun Chaser in all of its glory. This build was a lot of fun to put together, and quite simple too. There really isn't a whole bunch of tricky bits here, except for that arrow. Yeah, that arrow can be a little bit finicky because you have to put the shaft together. There's no tab securing it. It's all just kind of pressure fitted. Then you got to feed it through the dragon itself. But once you get through that piece, securing the feathers and the arrowhead there is quite simple. The only other piece that I would caution builders with is where the dragon meets the actual clock face. Inside, there's these tabs that kind of keep everything together, and if they're too tight, your clock won't work. It will actually be only right about twice a day, and if you want your clock right all the time, finding the sweet spot between keeping this secured and having it freely moving is the key. You might have to take it apart a couple of times to find that piece. And if you find that this is not moving at all, you got to be careful because you'll actually strip the gears on the inside the mechanism. Now, they are strong gears, but friction is never your friend when it comes to these models. Now, can I recommend this build for beginners out there? Absolutely. Like I said earlier, this was a very simple build to put together. And yeah, I do have all the tools, but I feel like somebody even with a basic set of tools could really have the same success here. It really only took me 2.5 hours to put together. And outside the two things I mentioned already, this thing really is seamless. The Metal Time team did a great job designing this build, and everything just really clicks together extremely well. The tolerances are amazing. If you've been looking to add a model that's a little bit different to your collection and actually does something, I would say you don't need to look much further than the Sun Chaser from Metal Time. I think if you build it, you'll be really impressed too. Alright Groovers, that brings us to the end of our episode. I had a really good time building the Sun Chaser with you, and if you guys had a good time, don't forget to press that like button. For more videos like this, hit subscribe as well. We've got all kinds of cool stuff coming on in the future, and I would love to have you there. Thank you so much to Metal Time for sending me the Sun Chaser to build. These guys are awesome to work with. They never ask to see my reviews beforehand, and all of my opinions are 100% my own. And if you look at the bottom of the screen right there, yeah, we're affiliated now, which means if you use that code right there, you're going to save yourself some money and also support the show, which is really cool. I'm so happy to be working with these guys. It's an awesome thing to be able to do, and I love where this time machine is taking me. Until next time, Groovers, keep building. All right, now you're going to go right in the center of the collection because I need to know what time it is.